Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? All
Good.
right.
Recording for progress.
Can you see my screen?
Hey.
Yeah. My picture fell down behind me and I just have to deal with it. Blank wall situation. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what does this do? Perfect. All right, arrow. Excellent. How was your day?
Good. Low key. What about you?
It was not low key, but it wasn't bad.
Oh yeah, you said you were busy today, huh?
Yeah, I like have transitioned just for June temporarily to work on Sundays. So I've had like I don't know, like consistently like 6 to 8 hours of work on Sunday. And my intent was then to trim out Wednesdays, but then that didn't happen.
Oh yeah.
But it's for sure going to happen in July.
Good.
Just because I'm bringing on two coaches to like take over some stuff for me, but they're getting onboarded this month and then they're going to be on their own next month.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good. It is very good. All right. And you got the email that I just sent. I had a couple people text me to say they got it. So I think, and there was I saw that you had signed up, but there was actually two other people that had signed up between whenever it was you and I that talked and then
Oh,
now. So
how exciting.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
Gave Goose a big treat thing to eat, so she doesn't
Mm,
bug me. She just doesn't know what to do with it. It's too big.
where to start?
Oh, will people have the ability to unmute themselves and ask a question verbally?
Yeah, I'm like 90% sure yes. I'm not sure how I check that. Let's see here. Screen sharing, participants, chat, show chat participants. Yeah. Hey, Rebecca. Hmm.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Were you on mute when you came in?
Yeah.
Okay. And then did you unmute yourself or did I do it?
Both.
Perfect.
Do you want me to stay unmuted?
No, Madeline just asked me if people would be able to unmute themselves, and I was not 100% sure. I thought the answer was yes, but I didn't know.
Yeah, like I unmuted it and then it said that you had to give me permission to speak. So
Got it. Yeah, it says like ask.
yeah,
All right.
which I always think is better.
So then should we just have people type their questions out, or would you?
So I put in the email that I just sent that they can use the chat feature, but
Okay.
that because it looked like there was 10 people potentially. I don't think it's gonna be too hard to manage. But I also think if we have a running list of questions, I can also publish those in the email with like a written response.
Okay, yeah, good idea.
Are people allowed to just
Cool.
enter as they show up, or do you have to let people in?
I have to let people in. I'll probably switch that. Like Christine set up the links. I'll probably switch that moving forward, just in case people want to pop in late and I don't see them. I don't want people to have to wait. Okay. Based on the feedback, it said that there might be like 10 people who are joining this evening. And right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but we're right at 6 my time, 5 your time right now. So we can give it another like 90 seconds or we can just get started.
Let's give folks,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
4:02, 6:02.
perfect. Yeah.
All right, for people just joining, we're gonna wait like 30 more seconds before we get going. So that's just what we're doing now.
Yeah, we might have everybody, Madeline.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm not sure if everyone got the notice right when you joined, but recording has started. So just keep that in mind. So hello and welcome to everyone to the first session of the Conjugate Training Methods seminar series. My name is Madeline Scott. I use they and she pronouns, and I am a co-founder of Strength for All Bodies. And I'm joining you all from Lakewood, Colorado. I think it's still in the 90s outside right now. So I hope everyone's dealing with whatever weather you have going on. And whether you're here with us live or you're watching this on demand, I'm so grateful that you're all here with us and taking advantage of this opportunity to learn from one of my good friends and my own powerlifting coach, Sarah Buckley of Persist Fitness. And just a little background, I approached Sarah late last year for some advice and finding resources to learn more about the conjugate training method so that I could be a better coach and a better athlete in it. And she ended up coming back to me and saying, why don't we just turn this into something that everyone can benefit from, and create a new educational resource for folks, which is just incredible and aligns perfectly with the mission of Strength for All Bodies to expand inclusivity and accessibility in strength sports. So we have a lot to cover over the next 3 sessions. You may have had a chance to look at the PowerPoint that was sent out already. We encourage you to engage however you feel comfortable, and I'll be here monitoring the chat. And if you want, you could also just raise your hand, take yourself off mute. You might have to request that you be allowed to speak, but however you want to ask questions and engage, go for it. Just keep in mind, again, that these sessions are recorded and will live on the World Wide Web. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, with that, I will let Sarah take over and introduce herself further and guide us to the light of conjugate training method.
Thank you, Madeline. I really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Sarah Buckley. I am a personal trainer and strength coach. I use she, her pronouns, and I got connected with Madeline through the sport of powerlifting, which is something that I have been doing myself from like a competitive standpoint, involved in the community for about 9 years. But I haven't always been a powerlifting coach. I've been a personal trainer for almost a decade. Actually, I think at the end of this year, it will be 10 years. But I took sort of the scenic route into coaching. I went to college for something completely different. I was a double major in political science and international studies with an emphasis in human rights, particular to the Middle East. And I worked in the nonprofit sector after college, and I really enjoyed and loved that work. However, I found that I was spending quite a bit of my time, my free time, sort of developing my hobby, which was fitness and working out and understanding the human body, both kind of like biologically and also psychologically, and the intersection of those two things. And so I thought, I'm going to see if I can turn my passion into a career. And I have been lucky enough to be able to do that. So just like Madeline said, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the conjugate method. We have a lot of material to get through. However, I want this to be catered to the individuals that are in front of me. So whatever questions you guys have, we'll go over it. This can be conversational. I'll make sure that we get everything in and kind of keep everything on track. So let's begin. So table of contents at the beginning. I'm going to hopefully get through like this first conjugate method, special strengths and methods tonight. And then programming, which is like practical application. People really enjoy that stuff. It's like the meat and potatoes where you're leaving the conversation and you could immediately go to the gym and apply something. That's going to take up the later 2/3 of the seminars. So we are going to start off with just what is the conjugate method and where did it come from? So the conjugate method was popularized and made famous in the United States via this guy named Louis Simmons, who is actually from Columbus, Ohio, about 2 hours from where I currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Ohio is sometimes known as the state of strength because this like mecca for strength and conditioning was built out in the west side of Columbus in just like this unassuming industrial park. But the reason that it ended up there was because of this guy named Louis Simmons, who he pulled quite a bit of foundational data and information from actually the Soviet Union. And strength sports accelerated significantly during the Cold War because it was a highly competitive time. So of course, I'm a little bit interested in this just because it's interesting to understand how we got the information that we got, but it's also important to understand like how this, you know, just lifting weights actually is like incredibly political, because the training of the athletes in the USSR, the way that they developed their athletes was incredibly specific and scientific. And unfortunately, very bad for human rights, but good for science. And the reason being is because they were able to essentially identify children who kind of like fit the parameters, body type, displayed curiosity, natural athletic ability, and they would pull them out and get them into these development camps. And we're talking, you know, thousands of kids. And then from there, they would develop these kids and they would, you know, push them into different athletic, basically like categories: gymnastics, weightlifting, the sport of weightlifting, which is different than powerlifting. It's the clean and jerk and the snatch, which is definitely a sport that this part of the world, which is now, you know, Russia and Eastern Europe, they are definitely known for being some of the strongest humans on earth. And part of it was because of this method that was developed at that time. So essentially, they were able to collect data on an incredibly large amount of people over an incredibly large amount of time, because they were just monitoring what these kids were doing. And then as they became young adults and into adulthood and they developed into the athletes that they were, they figured out what worked and what didn't work. Eventually, that made its way, actually quite interestingly, through the black market into the prison systems. Prisons in the United States, guys who just wanted to get strong, like in the prison yard, they were getting these books illegally, because it was like communist propaganda. They were getting these books illegally and they were using them just to, you know, get stronger, to protect themselves. So the first ideas came over and they were at a place in Culver, California, which was the original West Side Barbell. And then Louis brought those concepts into Columbus, Ohio. And then pretty much from there, he has been identified as pretty much like he from in the past 50 years, and he passed away sometime in the last 5 years. He has been innovating and building equipment and finding new methodology to push the conjugate method forward. And I learned from an athlete that he developed, my coach, whose name is Laura Phelps Stackhouse. She operates and owns a gym called The Hive in Cincinnati, Ohio. She is one of the world's greatest powerlifters, has many, many successful powerlifting athletes, and also trains personal training. But after kind of like Louis taught her and she was his protege, she sort of decided she also like has developed and added on to the method as well. And so that was always Louis's intent. His intent was never that the method is stagnant. The intent was that people would continue to produce and research and find new ways to expand and evolve the method as we got smarter and have new technology and things like that. So that is just a little bit of like where and how this came about. And we're going to talk about what the conjugate method is. It is a system, a critical thinking system, to help coaches and individuals organize your physical training. We need to be thinking of training. The word training versus the word working out means something. So to me, and I've explained this to this is a great way for a coach to, if you are a coach and you're trying to say like, what's the difference between you and somebody else? This is something that's worked well for me, where you are training an individual. You have an end goal. Every single thing that you're doing in each individual training session is a building block for the ultimate place that you are going. Whereas I would view the language and the strategy of a workout as something that's standalone. It's not necessarily influenced by something else. It's not necessarily teaching you or developing you for a skill set or a strength that you need moving forward. Is a workout completely acceptable to just do something to move your body for fun? Yes, it is. However, if there isn't an organization to how you are training, then we can run into plateaus, stagnancy, boredom, injury, all different kinds of things. So, you know, we should move forward in a smart way. The word conjugate means concurrent, which essentially is that there's going to be multiple training methods being utilized at the same time. And that could be within a particular training split, meaning maybe like a 3-day a week or a 4-day a week training split. That could mean within a particular training session. So maybe you're doing a lower body session, you can be training multiple methods inside of one session. You could be even training multiple methods within one exercise. Okay, so we want to understand really specifically what the intent is that we're going for. And as much as we can layer our training on top of each other, that can be really beneficial. People are time strapped, they are resource strapped. And if this is sounding confusing to you right now, that's okay. We're going to kind of break this down practically. But essentially, what it is that a client or maybe yourself, you want to do this ABC physical task. You want to do some kind of physical task. It could be weightlifting, it could be running, it could be aerial strap work there, and you name it, physical task, whatever you want it to be. However, you currently don't have the physical capacity to do that task that is your goal. So every single thing that we're doing involves different capacities that are needed. And rather than training those capacities individually, we're going to train them concurrently at the same time. Okay, so we're not going to say, oh, we're just going to train hypertrophy, we're just going to train power, we're just going to train strength. That is a linear method. And in my opinion, it is not an efficient way to train, but it is also not a correct way to train, because those phases, there's so much overlap. So for instance, we know now, we used to say, oh, strength repetition, when you're training strength, it means you're training between like 5 to 8 reps. But if you want to train for hypertrophy and muscle building, you need to be training for 10 reps or higher. We know now that those rep schemes are not true anymore, and that everything is based on the stimulus that we're inputting into the tissue. And so I would recommend folks, there is a time and a place for running a linear progression, but I do not think that it is enough to simply run just a linear progression. And I don't think it will do what you think it's going to do. How are we doing on questions so far? Anybody got any?
There's nothing in the chat, but people,
All right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll keep going then. All right. So a pillar of the conjugate method is the dynamic systems theory, which is a theory that is not specifically intended to be applied to strength and conditioning. However, we must look at everything that we are doing as coaches. We are training human beings, and human beings are dynamic systems. So what is a dynamic system, and what is dynamic systems theory? So dynamic systems is a complex self-organizing entity that changes and interacts with itself over time. So from like a philosophical standpoint, this is kind of like, you are not the person that you were yesterday. And, a stream running down a mountain is never the same stream. It's that kind of thought process. And the reason that we need to take this into consideration is because I, as a coach, very deeply believe that we should be meeting the human being in front of us where they are. And if we don't understand that that human being is a dynamic system, we are going to maybe take an assessment on day one. We might be asking them some questions as we onboard them in the first month. And then what? We're going to make decisions purely off of that information without acknowledging that when every single time that they come into a training session, they have just experienced a totally different last 24 hours. They are a totally different, even biological entity, because you've been training them now for a certain period of time. So it's not enough, unfortunately, to just work with information that gets outdated very, very, very quickly when we are working with human individuals. And so we need to understand that we are not silos. We are affected by different stressors, external stressors, relationship, work, family. We are impacted by sleep. We are impacted by diet. We are impacted by, hydration. So none of us can operate purely just by, I mean, to a certain extent, we could say, oh, I got 2 hours of sleep last night. I'm surviving completely on caffeine. I had a shit day at work and I'm still going to go into my training session. I'm going to absolutely kick ass. Like that could happen a couple of times. Like you could just purely like put your head down and absolutely go for it. However, we know that the human body is not going to be able to do that for extended periods of time, and you're going to start to experience diminishing returns. So a linear training model for a dynamic system, that dynamic system being the human body, it doesn't make sense because we are making a plan and we're making a progression in the linear model based on data that gets outdated, almost immediately. Okay. So, and particularly for highly trained individuals, that linear model is going to fall apart very quickly. If you are coaching somebody who's brand new to the gym, you could do literally anything with them and it's going to work because they are just fresh and open and ready for the adaptation. But other people are going to need a more specific stimulus. And again, my opinion is that just because somebody is new or someone is not labeled as an athlete does not mean that they should not have access to the best, most organized training. How do we feel about dynamic systems in general or specific to training? All right, cool. Got a bunch of smarty pants on the call tonight. All right. So the conjugate method itself doesn't necessarily preach anything specific about assessments and about how to do an assessment. I think an assessment is something that every coach should have some assessment process. I think it's only fair that you give the person in front of you an opportunity to tell them about themselves. You need to learn about their training history. You need to learn about their health history. You need to learn what kind of learner they are. It would be beneficial for you to understand if they've worked with a coach before and if they had a good experience or a bad experience. So some of these are kind of like the soft skills of coaching, but what you can see is I'm looking at my assessment process through a conjugate lens. I'm understanding and realizing not only do I need to develop this person physically, so yeah, I need to look at their joints. I need to check out connective tissue. I'm going to look at their gait cycle. I'm going to watch them squat. But aside of all of that, I need to figure out a way to get them to trust me and to listen to me. Because otherwise, anything that I do, any of my recommendations, it's not going to work. And that the impetus is on me, it's not on them to just automatically trust me right out the gate. That's not fair to the client. So when I'm thinking about how do I address this person in front of me fairly, I want to understand a lot about them because that helps me, again, train them congruently. I'm not only interested in developing a person's physical resiliency, I'm also interested in how that physical resiliency carries over into mental and emotional resiliency. And so I need to kind of understand, again, what our starting point is. So we would use the language like identifying a point A. So when somebody comes in, their point A is they've been strength training for 2 years. They've hit a plateau. They feel kind of good with the lifts, but they feel scared sometimes. They've had a coach before that they really enjoyed, but there wasn't a lot of variety. These are just like run of the mill things that I've heard and seen a lot. They maybe took a break from lifting for whatever reason, and now they have a goal of and it might not, a lot of the folks I work with, their goals are more qualitative. They want to get into the gym 2 to 3 times a week to feel better. And like, that's literally it. They're not trying to deadlift 200 pounds. They're not like, it typically develops into something like that. But at the beginning, they're literally just like, please help me get into the gym. Okay. And so all your knowledge of the human body and all of your knowledge about joints and connective tissue and the conjugate method and stimulus, all of that is not going to help you get that person into the gym. Okay. So there's another piece of this that I want coaches to understand is that like, this is a real person in front of you. It's just not like a bag of meat. Okay, they've got a brain inside of them and they need help to kind of like get across the threshold. All right. They don't feel like this is accessible to them for whatever reason. It's probably a really good reason, actually, whether you can put yourself in their shoes or not. So we want to identify what do they have, and that's not only what do they have physically, that's what do they have mentally. Like, do they even have the capacity to train? You're going to find a way to help them do so. But if it is an individual who is a caretaker for a dying parent, they might also be a single parent, they have a dog, they work full time. So like when we think about resources for this individual, time is not one of them. Okay, so you better be giving them everything that they need in their session and nothing that they don't need. You cannot waste time or volume with these folks, okay? What do they want to do? They want to come into the gym a little bit more. They want to lift, they want to feel stronger. They want to feel more confident in their body. Okay, so lifting weights and moving around is generally going to give them kind of that return on investment because it's going to make them feel good. Their brain is going to be, you know, making all those happy hormones. Your physical body is going to interact with your endocrine system. Things are going to start to happen. But what do they need? Maybe they don't have a strategy for like consistency. So something they've identified about themselves is that like maybe they have an all or nothing mindset where they start out really strong in the gym and they'll like come 5 days a week, but then something happens and they fall off and then they're back to 0 days a week. Okay, so as coaches, it's like, what strategies and skills do they have? And maybe that's that they already have a 200-pound back squat that looks really, really good. But maybe it's they have, you know, good problem solving strategies for behavior change, right? So again, like, please don't think of this method and this problem solving and this organization as just a way to train the meat on the human body, because it is not. It is a way for us to address every single human being. And if you're anything like me, you love a system, you want to be able to kind of like check and balance yourself, and this is how we do that. Programming and how we decide how we interact and how we treat this client and what physical tasks we give them and what we actually assign them to do from an exercise standpoint, that's all going to happen down the line in programming. And the reason I'm such a strong advocate for training the conjugate method and a huge, I actually don't know really a lot of other coaches who utilize this for general population, is because this is such a layered and condensed version where people can be getting multiple training inputs in a very, very short period of time. To me, it makes the most sense to use this for general population. Typically, the conjugate method is associated with athletes only, but athletes' entire lives are dedicated to training. They are happy to be in the gym 4+ days a week. They are happy to have their sleep on check. They are happy to count their macros and get everything in, right? So they are not necessarily resource starved. General population is incredibly resource starved. And to me, this is the way that we give them every single thing that they need, rather than saying, well, we're going to do this for 4 weeks and you have to do this for 4 weeks and you're not going to see anything else until you're ready for the next thing. Okay. So I don't love that either, because it also just kind of makes them feel like right out the gate they can't do stuff, which is not true. Everybody can always do something, and it's our job as coaches to identify what the thing is that they can do. Okay, so we're going to talk about special strengths. This is like a specific vocabulary word that's utilized in the conjugate method. And so when you are doing the physical side of the assessment, and again, you know, everybody hopefully has their own process for that. I do a number of things, but what we want to identify is what special strengths does this individual need to fulfill their physical goal. Okay, so I am familiar with a couple of you in the room right now, but I'm not familiar with everybody. Unless somebody wants another specific example, which I'm happy to run through, I'm just going to use a powerlifter as an example, because like the 6 people that I'm looking at right now, I know would be interested in that. But raise your hand, I'll give a second example. Okay, so when I'm thinking about a powerlifting athlete and I might be assessing them, I have to understand the sport of powerlifting. So I might need to do a little bit of research. If there's a sport that somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to do like, I don't know, long distance kayaking. I don't know anything about that. I'm going to need to learn about energy system. I'm going to need to look into like, what does a human body who wants to do endurance kayaking, like, what do they need? Okay. And once I figure out what they need, I run it back and I figure out special strengths. So strength is the word strength, like capital S, is not just one thing. So when you, and you guys like know that because you've said before, oh, that person's really strong. And it might mean that that person has a huge deadlift, or it might be that that person, you know, can run a really fast 5K, or it might be that that person is mentally super tough, right? So those three things are not the same, but the word strong and the description of strength applies to all of those things. So the example, so strength is what we say, it's an emergent behavior, and it is a physical expression of our internal capacities and all of our special strengths working together, whether those are physical strengths or emotional mental strengths. So special strengths, as an example, we're going to use powerlifting. What does powerlifting need? Well, powerlifters need to be able to lift a very heavy single several times in a row in a competition setting. So they need to be working at, you know, 100% of their capacity several times throughout their lifting day. So they need something called absolute strength. That's a special strength. Absolute strength is literally just how much can a person lift. We typically compare absolute strength to something called relative strength. Relative strength is how much can you lift in comparison to your body weight. So if you have two individuals that weigh, I don't know, 150 pounds, and both of them can deadlift 300 pounds, absolute strength says that they are, or you have an individual that weighs 150 pounds and you have an individual that weighs 200 pounds, okay? And they both deadlift 200 pounds. Absolute strength says they are the same amount of strong, okay? They can both deadlift 200 pounds. Relative strength says that the person that weighs less is stronger, okay? And there's value to both of those measures, okay? And people will argue on the internet about that for hours. Another kind of special strength is endurance. This kind of goes back to maybe like a long distance runner, the long distance kayaker. That was just something random that I came up with. I've never worked with somebody like that, but I'd have to figure it out. Explosive power is another kind of strength. Dynamic endurance is another kind of strength. Isometrics is another. These are all special strengths. They all are trained under the umbrella of strength training. However, they all require a separate and specific stimulus or input into the body. So in order for me to train absolute strength with an individual, I have to give them one particular stimulus. In order to train explosive power in an individual, I have to give them another kind of stimulus. I can't overlap those. They need to be, sometimes there is an opportunity for overlap. And that kind of happens more in like accessory work and things like that. But when we're talking about, you know, prioritizing inputs, a powerlifter needs to be able to do an incredibly heavy single. An endurance athlete, they would need to be able to do many, many repetitions of low to moderate load over a significant amount of time with little to no rest, because that's a stimulus that would replicate the physical task that they are going towards. Okay, so we're not talking about exercises right now. We're simply talking about identifying special strengths that an individual is either lacking or has. That way, during the assessment, we can start to identify a game plan of, oh, this person needs more absolute strength, or this person needs more relative strength, or more explosive power, or more endurance, etc. And so because I know what they need, I can begin to start formulating a plan. And that plan is, you know, the meat and potatoes of programming. So the specificity conversation, which is an important one that I want you guys to all think about is that when we think about training, and the conjugate method is known for this, but it can get very confused. So if we need to go over this more, I am very happy to do it. Because if you don't understand anything else after this entire 3-week seminar, this is what I would like you to understand. That the stimulus at which we are working trumps the movement that we are choosing to deliver that stimulus in. Meaning, again, I'll use powerlifting as an example. Individuals who powerlift need to know how to squat, bench, and deadlift because that is what their sport demands. That is the skill that they need to develop. However, making an individual bench press, let's say, for example, I don't know, 5 by 10 to 15 reps every week at a really low percentage of their, say their 1 rep max, say their tested 1 rep max, it gives them the opportunity to practice their movement. It gives them the opportunity to practice their skill set. However, it does not expose them to the stimulus that their sport demands. And therefore, it is not sport specific, and it is not good enough for that particular client. So how we deliver the stimulus is up to us, but the stimulus is the priority. And then how we decide to deliver it through movements and exercises, that could be based on an individual's physical capabilities. That could be based on what an individual enjoys. That could be based on what the individual is doing for their sport. So maybe it's football and not powerlifting, and you choose, I don't know, like a standing chest press that is a little bit more sport specific, but make sure that you're delivering the correct stimulus. Okay. Questions? Madeline and or Rebecca, I know you understand this already. Do you want to throw anything out that you think people might not understand about this conversation?
Wondering if you could give feedback. If you could give an example of a stimulus, like that's not a 5 by 10 at a low percentage. Give an example of a stimulus that would work.
Sure. So we could actually take the football player example. I don't want to just put everything into the powerlifting bucket. So like a D lineman needs to be able, like those plays, I want to say, I'm talking a little bit out of pocket here, but I don't think it really matters. The plays like are going to be, well under 10 seconds. We're talking probably like 5 to 7 seconds at most. And they're going to come off the line and they're going to run into the other person and they're going to have to push them as long as the play lasts. And we know that these plays don't last very long. So that is an expression, that is the emergent behavior of absolute strength. And absolute strength gets trained one way and one way only, through the max effort method. So the stimulus would be lifting, pushing something at 90% or above for 1 rep max, which could be done with a bench press. It could be done with a standing chest press machine. It could honestly be done with like a sled, pushing a sled. It could be done with a force plate somehow where it's an isometric where they're not even moving anything. But it has to be maximum effort. And that maximum effort method is developing the special strength of absolute strength. And we know that it's a maximum effort method because it's going to be an all-out effort that only lasts 7 to 10 seconds. And you can't replicate it more than once.
So if, like in this example, then kind of to relate it to the bench press, to train that absolute stimulus of the stimulus of the absolute strength for that football player, you're not doing like 5 by 10 pushing another person. You're going into the gym and training the absolute strength required in that movement.
Yeah, we want to make sure that, I'm a strength coach. I'm not a skills coach. So my job is to make whoever, if it's that football player, like he better be super strong. You know, they better be able to stand their ground against, you know, some of these players are almost 400 pounds, right? And I actually think I know for a fact, because one of my mentors, whose name is John Quint, he does a special program for linemen and he works with the NFL. So they have data that we know that a D lineman in the NFL needs to be able to bench press a 1 rep max of 500 pounds in order to basically be ready, game day ready for competition. So once for a power lifter, like powerlifters just want to keep getting stronger, like no matter what. Like they bench 500 pounds, they're like, I want to bench 510, right? But for the D linemen, once they've benched 500 pounds, they don't need any more absolute strength. So then they would start to look at the other special strengths. So exactly what you're saying, we develop absolute strength in the gym, and then you go express it on the field.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to, and you started to go into this, is we can focus on the stimulus side of that, which you've just beautifully explained. And we can also then, on the flip side, making sure that everyone catches this, that this isn't about the movement of the bench press, right?
Correct.
Like, yes, you have to be good at the bench press if you are a power lifter and you're going to compete, but it doesn't really matter necessarily that the D lineman is good at the bench press. What matters is that they are exerting that maximal effort, and it can be in anything that's semi-similar. And that's what I think is so cool about the conjugate method, is because there's a lot of, I'm sure you're going to go into this, a lot of variation.
Yeah.
Because that also is very advantageous for the health of the musculoskeletal system.
Correct. Yeah. So the reason that John uses the bench press is because it's accessible. Every guy that he trains in the NFL knows how to bench press. So he doesn't have to teach them how to do it. He knows every single gym across the United States and internationally has a bench press. So he's chosen an exercise to deliver the stimulus because it's uncomplicated. He doesn't want something that has like high cognitive like load for these athletes. He wants them to just be able to do something that they've been doing probably since they were 13 years old or younger, right? If we're talking about an NFL player. But Rebecca is 1,000% right. I'm going to give an example really quick. So the max effort method can be used with everybody, and it's actually highly beneficial for the older population, because what's happening when we train absolute strength is it's actually coordination, because all of our muscle fibers, our muscle cells, are working together to squeeze and contract and elicit force, like all at one time. Okay, so they all have to get together and say, like, we are doing this thing, we are going to push this object, we are going to stand up from the bottom of this squat. So I have a client who, when she was a young, like 6-month-old baby, she had what they actually thought was, they didn't really know what it was. She's in her early 70s. But she never did PT. She never did anything. And I've been training her. This will be my 9th year training her. And we do a lot of max effort stuff because the entire left side of her body, it's like, it's compromised. Okay. It has atrophy. She can't open her hand. Her elbow stays bent all the time. Like one leg is much smaller than the other. She was in a bunch of different braces when we started working together. But the point is to just say, like, this is an individual that could be seen by society as someone who should not be lifting weights, as someone who is frail, because they are not, you know, from their outward expression, they might be thought of as like not being physically capable. And someone might say, oh, it's dangerous to expose this individual to something called max effort method. So how do we train this person? Well, she experiences falls sometimes because she has trouble with her feet. So I designed a max effort exercise for her, which is she's getting up and down off the floor, and she starts at body weight, and then I put a weight vest on her. And will go up and down off the floor 7 to 9 times. And every single time she attempts again, I give her 5 more pounds in her weight vest, because she needs to be able to get off the floor after she has fallen. She needs to be able to organize her whole body to express one big, strong, absolute strength movement to get herself up off the ground. She might not have help. So it's not just a matter of performance, it's a matter of quality of life for this individual. So the method that I'm utilizing with her to train absolute strength is the max effort method. But the means, which I'm going to go into here, like Rebecca had said, it doesn't have to be a bench press, it doesn't have to be a squat. The means is simply stand up. And then she figures out how to stand up with a 25-pound weight vest on her. And then when she falls and it's just her body weight, I don't worry. Questions about that? All right, cool. All right. I might kind of skip past this or come back to it. Characteristics of the conjugate method. Multiple training methods used concurrently. We already talked about that. High work capacity. This is definitely something the conjugate method is known for, which basically means we're going to work from a human first lens. You need foundational strength before you can do some other stuff. So if I have a person coming in, I'm going to train, like we already talked about, kind of training the human being in front of you. If it's someone who has athletic goals, then we're going to identify what is like, what do you need to be athletic? Not even for your sport. Like, how can I make you a more athletic person? How can I improve your reaction time? How can I improve your connective tissue stiffness? How can I improve your overall strength? Then I'm going to say, okay, what sport do you want to do? Okay, it's powerlifting. Cool. You're already really good at the deadlift, but we need to work on your bench press. So it gets more and more specific the deeper we get in. But sometimes people are entering into the relationship with me where like they already have kind of the human first training. Maybe they've been lifting weights for 20 years. They've already done some other stuff. And so we can get a little bit more specific. Something that the conjugate method I don't think is known for and gets confused a lot is that there are built-in deloads with self-limiting movements. This is a criticism it gets, is where it's just like, but you guys never deload. All you ever do is lift and you never take breaks. Well, we actually do take breaks because we give ourselves movements that are in the absolute shittiest positions known to mankind. And we then ask ourselves to lift weight from that incredibly terrible position. And guess what? We can't lift very much from there because we're not supposed to. Because biomechanically, it's a significant disadvantage for us. Okay, so we will deload while we are still getting the stimulus. Because remember, stimulus is king or queen or whatever. Definitely no king. Okay, we're always peaked. Meaning like we are pretty much always ready to go because we don't take the deload. We can, we're basically ready and prepared, which I like for everybody, athletes all the way down to general population. Again, general population people are dealing with tons of stressors. You guys are all just regular humans too. Even if you are athletes, stuff comes up, work comes up, you have a big pet bill, you have all these other things going on. We want to be able to deal with that. And then also it really accommodates for what do you like to do? What training, what exercises do you like? To me, there's so many different ways that your upper back could get trained. There's so many ways that your hamstrings could get trained. And yeah, there are some non-negotiable for me where I'm like, this is the best way to do this. If there was another way, I would give it to you. But at the end of the day, I'm like, what do you like? I'll give it to you. Like, we can find a way for you to have fun and train at the same time. Anybody who wants to get anywhere, coaches, we need to find a way to help people be consistent when so many things are obstacles for them. And if giving them something that they're looking forward to is it, like, done for me. So easy, super low hanging fruit. All right, this kind of goes along with it. Common misconceptions and mistakes. We've talked a little bit about max effort. People consider it to be dangerous. My argument is that it's more dangerous to not expose yourself to challenging, hard load, both mentally and physically, because ultimately, at some point in our life, we are going to encounter hard, heavy load, mentally, emotionally, physically. And if we're not prepared for it, it's going to be way worse than if we were prepared for it. That's the short answer. Too much variation, too much novelty. That's going to depend on the athlete and the coach. There's sometimes where it makes sense to keep things kind of in a more linear and in a short linear progression. And this is a good time for me to say, like, I'm not totally against linear progression. I will say though, we know science has taught us that there's about a 3 to 4 week window where we can continue to adapt as humans. And then after that, we're not going to adapt to that stimulus anymore. So doing a linear progression much longer than a month or a month and a couple of maybe a week, we may start to see diminishing returns. So if you're my client and you're brand new, we're probably going to do a lot of the same stuff over again, but I'm not going to run you into the ground and not get any return on it, because again, why are we doing this? Dynamic effort, similar to max effort, it's a stimulus that addresses training a specific kind of special strength. Dynamic effort trains the special strength of explosive power, which is something, again, I would argue every human needs, not just athletes. Some athletes need it more than others, but even endurance athletes could benefit from dynamic effort work. This is commonly, and we're going to go over all of this in programming, but dynamic effort work, I see it online all the time. And also clients have questions about it too, where it's just not being done at the correct load. Bar speed is the most important thing when we're looking at dynamic effort. People frequently I actually just made a post about this because I saw a funny meme. My in-person clients are wanting to lift heavy every single day of their life. And we just aren't doing that. Okay. Like, I love lifting heavy, and we're not going to do it every single day. We sometimes have to train other special strengths. We simply cannot train max effort every single time. Accommodating resistance, that's going to be chains and bands from below. Figuring out the percentages, it can be complicated. We're going to go over that. Weight selection for max effort days. This, on one of these slides, I actually have a link to me explaining how to do this, because this is a super common thing that gets misunderstood, and it's not intuitive at all. So it's not like, oh, why don't you know how to do that? Well, if nobody has ever specifically taught you how to work up to a max effort, there's no way that you would know how. Okay. And then we just talked at length about this confusion between movement specific versus stimulus specific. I said particularly in powerlifting, because for most sports, you use the squat to develop lower body strength, but in powerlifting, you use the squat to develop lower body strength as well as practice your sport at the same time. And that's not the case with almost anything except for like weightlifting. I'm sure there's other examples, but that's basic. Strongman, maybe, but not, yeah. Okay, so methods versus means, and I've got an eye on the time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to leave some. So methods are the training inputs, not the exercises. So methods are the things that we use to train the special strength. So we have special strengths. We know that we need to develop them. We choose a method. Special strength and method are connected. And I think this next slide will help you guys understand that better. The means are how you deliver the stimulus, how you deliver the method. I'm going to skip over that one for now. Okay, method. So we talked about, maximal effort method trains absolute strength. So in green is the method, and in orange is the special strength that it trains. Dynamic effort method, it's a method, and it trains speed strength. That's the special strength. I'll go through repetition method not to failure and repetition method to failure. These are the orange stuff, trains hypertrophy, pushes recovery. So you can see that there's a method that aligns with a special strength. Okay, those guys get paired together. And then the means through which you deliver the method is completely up to you as a coach. Okay, these are some other ones. Oscillating isometric muscle actions. Wow, sorry guys. Train reactive strength, that's a special strength. Yielding isometric muscle actions and holding isometric muscle actions train isometric strength. Okay, so I gave kind of like the parameters for what these methods have to, how you set up these methods. But again, the exercise you choose to deliver them, can vary. So for instance, the max effort method, you could do bench press. You could do the get up off the ground like I do with my client, Lori. You could do squatting. You could do sled dragging. You could do pull-ups, max effort pull-ups. This is pretty common in the fight community. Max efforts, like push-ups, single arm push-ups. Like I've like anything in the world that you could think of exercise wise, you could do max effort for it. Now, if you're just somebody who's like, I want to do this for fun, cool. But if you're training somebody that has a specific goal, I would want to know, like, why did you choose why did you choose that particular means in which to deliver the maximal effort? It needs to make sense. Dynamic effort method, again, speed, it trains something called speed strength, also known as power, also known as explosiveness. This is when we are lifting moderate weight very quickly. Okay, so our bar speed is the main priority here, and the bar speed needs to be 0.8 to 1.8 meters per second squared. If you have access to a fancy gym, there's all kinds of equipment that can time your bar speed. Otherwise, just start to get experience either filming yourself and filming your clients, because you'll be able to do the eye test in no time. Like, I can look at a bar speed and know immediately if it's moving too slow. If it's moving too fast, it probably means that they actually need to increase their load, because we want to be in the sweet spot, because we know at this speed that is training speed strength. If we're outside of it, then we're no longer training the correct stimulus anymore. Repetition method, not to failure. This is typically where all of our accessory work is going to live. It's mostly a hypertrophy stimulus, meaning that you need to be lifting as heavy as you can for the rep scheme programmed to you. And I always tell people to leave 1 or 2 reps in the tank. Could you potentially go to failure? Yes, but if you go to true failure on every single exercise, you may not be able to recover, or you're just going to have to really work hard at recovery. And that's already such an opportunity for all of us. Like, we all could recover better. Repetition method to failure. This is done at a low intensity. So we actually can go to failure. This is like banded push downs, body weight movements. The risk, there's little to no risk of like overdoing it. Honestly, just because your brain is going to just say, nah, I'm good. This is too hard. I'm not doing this anymore before something bad happens. And then there's, these ones, reactive strength, isometric strength. So I'm kind of telling you guys what these specific inputs are, and then you could choose how to utilize them. Okay. So the means, just to be clear, the method is how we train the specific strength, and the means is the way that we're driving the specific stimulus. So it can be an exercise, it can be a position. And then I also said that it could be tissue specific or skill specific. And that kind of just means if you're trying to train the hamstring, then you can set up something to train the hamstring. If you're trying to help somebody get better at grinding out a squat, that would be a skill, then you could deliver them a squat variation to help them learn how to grind a squat better. Okay. So it's 6:56. This is actually kind of perfect. I had to skip over a few things, but who has questions? And I'm willing also to stay after. Like I'm good. If people want to chat, you guys let me know.
Can you give an example of the acronyms?
Mm-hmm.
The different isometrics and stuff, like what kind of movement in kind of plain language?
Okay. So it's possible that this oscillating isometric muscle action, this is not widely available and known. It is done with typically a bamboo bar or a rhino bar and hanging kettlebells. And it's a little bit different than just the traditional bamboo bar with the hanging kettlebells with like a double band. That is typically used for like improving stability and kind of just getting a pump. giving people's shoulders a break. This is, if we want to use bench press as an example, we need to set up kettlebells so that they oscillate on this bar, and they really need to be kind of out of control and have a high level of chaos, because the idea here is that in the bench press, in this example, we're going to be training reactive strength, which is a behavior of our connective tissue. So it's a facet of our connective tissue that we're going to be training. So it's a 5 to 7 repetition with a 3-second pause. So when I program this, particularly for my raw bench pressers, I want them to pause at their mid-range as these bands and these kettlebells are going crazy, and they're going to need to be like at a dead stop for that 3-second pause. And the intent that I am trying to drive is that I know that most injuries happen at the mid-range, and for raw benchers, most pec and bicep tears happen at the mid-range. So I'm trying to give them more training and more specific training in their mid-range into their connective tissue, because that is their limiting factor when they are benching big weight. So I will find, I have some videos of this. I will link this in the email. And then the yielding isometrics and the holding isometrics, those are way more common. Those are going to be, so isometrics, this is one that I would recommend only as needed for external training work, meaning with your typical strength training. And the reason for that is, so a good example of isometric work might be like pulling into a pin. So basically like placing a deadlift bar on the floor and then having pins over top of them, so that when you stand up, you can't actually stand up, but you're going to try to continue to pull into those pins. They can be really good for overcoming plateaus and sticking points. However, and they're very safe because it's an isometric, there's no muscle shear. So it's also a great re-entry point if you have had an injury to a particular body part. There's always a way for something to be done. But it slows down bar speed, obviously, because it's taking bar speed to a dead stop. So that's why I say would only recommend as needed, because I wouldn't want people to be doing tons and tons of pauses or tons and tons of isometrics with their global movements, with their deadlift, bench press, squat, any Olympic lifting thing, because I don't want them to lift slowly. I want people to lift quickly.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll get examples together of everything. What else? Okay. One more thing before we leave, way down here. Okay. So not next week, but the week after, we're going to be going over training splits that you can utilize. And this is just literally going to be, I'm going to send you guys like programming examples, like literal programs. Okay. And we're going to go over everything together. I'm going to do a powerlifting / strength sports 4-day split. I'm also going to do a general population 2 to 3 day a week split. I'm also going to take requests. If people want to know how to do something for a specific client, for a specific sport, send it to me and I will come up with an example training split. And we'll do a little, what's it called? When you have an example and you work through it, case study. And we'll do a case study together. Good job, brain. All right. Okay, what other questions do we have? Are we good for this evening? And then also, if something happens where you think of something later on, just send it to me. I'll get to it.
You want to just quickly let everyone know what to expect in the email, like after this session as well?
Yes, so this recording will go out to everybody, whether they were here with us today or not. I will also get together those videos about the examples that you just asked me about. The Zoom link for next Sunday, same time, same place, all that stuff will also be in the email. And I will remind people that I'm looking for programming split requests if they want me to address a particular issue. Is that everything, Madeline?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody being with us on a Sunday night. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a kick-ass week.
Thanks again, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. You're welcome.
So much, Sarah.